I'm Tyler Matthews. I'm the Executive Director of Venture Cafe St. Louis, and this is the Education at the Intersection of Equity and Innovation series, which is part of EdHub St. Louis, a program of Venture Cafe. And normally Dr. Marcus Howard, who's our expert in residence for EdHub, usually leads it, but there is a conflict, so I'm taking it over today. Hopefully I can do his role justice. But I did want to start off just by thanking everybody, and then also thanking our sponsor, the Regional Business Council, for making this possible. Really quickly, the Regional Business Council is a consortium of 100 CEOs that represent large and mid-cap companies in the St. Louis metro area. And their mission is to unite and engage members to act on like high-impact business, civic, and philanthropic affairs to benefit the St. Louis area. And the goal of this series really is to motivate and empower listeners to think outside of the box for education, and think and don't get stuck on thinking about what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to sound like or feel like, but really just spark some inspiration on what really what it should look like in today's society. And throughout the series, we highlight different innovators like Edna today, from around St. Louis and the country, who are thinking radically different about education, but then also thinking about how to not just disrupt the market, but also think about the equitable experiences for students and those furthest away from access to opportunity and innovation. And so without further ado, I do want to welcome Edna Martinson, and we're going to actually turn it over to you to kick things off, to share a little bit more about what you're doing and the different type of work that you're seeing and operating in with your organization. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. So thanks again, Edna, for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Super honored to be a part of this. I will go ahead and share my screen to make sure. Let's see. Do you see my screen? Perfect. So yeah, it's great to be here. Happy to share more on Boddle Learning and the work we're doing to increase student engagement and addressing math learning gaps through games. This has been, just a passion of my team and I, is especially addressing the learning gaps that students have in the early years. We're talking kindergarten through 6th grade, and really seeing how we can strengthen their foundational skills and put them at a better position as they, kind of graduate into middle school, high school, and beyond. So really quickly, agenda for what I'll run through: brief background on myself, on the company, and what we're doing. I'll go through why games and what we've seen the impact be in the classroom, and also the impact on teachers and the work that they're doing. And then I'll go through, how Boddle works. I'll talk on specific learning features for students and how that ties into the game mechanics as well. And then I'll talk through educator benefits and the ways that it saves teachers time, and even from a higher level, how it helps with continuous assessment throughout the school year. And then lastly, I'll talk on accessibility, which is really, really important for us, making sure that all students are able to access learning products like Boddle, and that we don't have like a paywall there that prevents students, especially in underserved communities, from accessing it. So I will jump right in. So Boddle is a gamified education platform focused in on kindergarten through 6th grade math for now, but we're looking to expand that to reading and phonics and other subjects in the future. Founded by my co-founder and husband and I in 2018. Prior to that, we've been working in edtech for combined years of like a decade plus in edtech. And it's been really interesting to see gamification kind of evolve. Also the mindset and perceptions that educators have of using games in the classroom, and how that has evolved over time too, how COVID has influenced that as well. So when we started Boddle in 2018, we saw, already our national report card is showing us that 50% of elementary students are not academically proficient in the foundational core subjects like math and reading. And it's due to the accumulation of gaps in learning when students are going from lesson to lesson, grade to grade, before mastering the foundational skills. And so we saw, coming from a games first approach, a way that we can capture student engagement and help them to continue to practice, because big believers in practice makes perfect, and then tying that into providing teachers and educators with the student data that allows them to properly understand how their students are performing, where the gaps are as well, and easy ways to address these gaps. And so I wanted to share this. I was speaking with a gentleman called John Gamba with University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education, and he shared this with me. It's talking on motivation that some game tools use. And the quote says, "You don't create motivation by making algebra fun, you make algebra fun by creating motivation, even and especially when it's initially absent." So that's the framework that we came in when we were creating Boddle. We came from a games first approach. Let's get students engaged, and then we embed the learning content into the platform. And so we would kind of call it internally like chocolate covered broccoli. So the more students, are able to fully be engaged into the gameplay, then they're more motivated through certain game mechanics we use to want to answer the question right, try again as well when they get the questions wrong. And then a second quote I wanted to bring up, this is a New Schools white paper that was done called Alive in the Swamp. And essentially in the white paper, it's talking about how the true transformation can only happen when digital learning solutions fuse engagement, pedagogical alignment, and professional development into one integrated solution. And so that was what was important for us as we were building this, this gamified platform, that we don't just focus on the games, but also providing the right teacher tools so that they can properly assess student progress and be able to identify and address their gaps as well. And then the professional development side comes from what is the support that's provided to teachers so they can easily implement this in their classroom, which is really important when looking at what type of tools would be great to use in the classroom. And so the four big areas with Boddle that we focus on, the first I mentioned already, engagement. The second is differentiated learning. We know, every student learns differently, and we wanted to tailor learning to each child with adaptive technology. So we do use machine learning to be able to, quickly identify where the gaps in learning are, and then automatically tailor learning to address those specific skills. And then for students who are ahead, we're able to accelerate rigor. Close learning gaps, again, AI technology, which helps to identify and close these gaps, and then real-time reports, which is really important for teachers as they're working in the classroom. It's this concept of continuous assessment. So instead of, it's testing season right now, so instead of just waiting for April to do testing, and then whenever testing season is again, they can kind of have a tool that they've been continuously using to assess throughout the school year, so they know at all times where their students are. And so this is just since we launched in the fall of 2019, starting with 2,000 students on the platform. And now we're at 200,000 plus students on the platform in the past 2 years. And it's been great to get student and teacher feedback. I think the benefit of being a fairly new tool and company is that we're able to iterate and listen to teacher feedback and make those updates so that they can get really what they need in their classroom quickly as well. And so how it works. So on the game front, which is what you see on the left side, it's a fun and engaging game, and students go through these interactive mini games. And in order to progress, we embed math learning content into the game. And so in order to get to the next level, next points, they have to answer these questions. And as they're answering the questions, we're using our adaptive engine to identify, where the gaps in learning are, and then tailor learning to those specific skills. And then, of course, giving that data and results back to the educators on their platform so they can see how students are doing. And at the same time, we allow teachers to quickly and easily create assignments and deliver it to students through the game. One thing that we found, especially during remote learning, is, teachers were giving students all these assignments through all these different avenues and seeing that students were not completing assignments. There were all these assignments that were not done. So then we talked to teachers who had recently joined Boddle, and they're like, oh yes, I love this for sending in homework because I know that students will actually do it. They're more engaged as well. So it helps on that front too, so that teachers are able to see student progress and students are actually getting their work done. And this, I wanted to share this. So this is our back end. Luckily, teachers and students never have to see this, but it helps to explain when we talk on machine learning and how it works. So essentially, we use a decision tree model, which ties every single skill to the other connected skills. So for example, Tyler and I can both be in 4th grade and doing the same assignment, but we're both struggling for different reasons. And the reason I'm struggling, it might adapt it down to a certain 2nd grade skill versus Tyler, it might adapt it down to a different 3rd grade skill that he needs to work on. And so this decision tree helps to connect all the skills together and not just have it, some educational products, you kind of go from learning fractions and after fractions, multiplication, but it doesn't identify, have you fully understood fractions? If you didn't, then what is the foundational core skill that you're stuck at that doesn't allow you to fully understand fractions? So that's just a little look at how we look at machine learning on our back end. So on the game side, content is adapted to each student's level and delivered through gameplay. And then students are encouraged to try their best with a 3-streak system. So this is just a little bit of game mechanics. As students get 3 questions correct, they're able to play a little mini game, a short 45-second bonus game. We've actually heard from students that they want it to be more than 3. They're like, can we, have 5 questions in, or like 5 streak in a row before they get a mini game? So those are a little bit of updates that we're going to be making here soon. It's always exciting when you hear that from kids. They're like, yeah, we want to, feel even more challenged, which is great. We implement learning tools as well, which is really important. We've heard from teachers how helpful this is. So the first is we have a sketch tool so students can sketch on the screen. The next is text to speech, which helps a lot with students who struggle with reading. A lot of the classrooms that we were able to physically be in before COVID, you had a lot of students who were in 4th grade, but they were still, 4th, 2nd, 3rd, still learning to read versus, by 3rd grade really should be reading to learn. And so this text to speech really helps them as they're going through these math questions. We also implement instructional videos that pop up, which help a lot with remote and hybrid learning. When you don't have a teacher right next to you or a parent or caregiver right next to you, you have this instructional video that can walk you through an example of the type of question. And then we also have rationales that pop up when students get questions wrong, which helps them to understand the concept and why they got it wrong and what the correct answer is. And then a big update that we recently made too, and this is just for like ease of use for teachers. Now teachers can get onboarded in less than 10 minutes. We integrated with Clever and Google single sign-on so that students don't have to remember yet another username and password. They can just log straight in with their Clever and with their Google. And then there was a lot of teachers who were using iPads, and so an app version was very necessary for us. So the app version now allows them to access Boddle on iPads. A big update that we're working on now is to make it accessible on the web for iPad, because I know a lot of teachers might not be able to download it on school iPads. So that's another update that's going to be coming. And then in terms of device requirements, this goes back to the accessibility question as well. I mean, we had students who are using very, very old Chromebooks. So optimizing it to work on those type of Chromebooks was super important for us. There's so many tools, especially when you're looking at things with high graphics, that unless you have the newest updated system on your device or the newest devices, it's very hard to run it on. So one of our priorities is optimizing it so it can run on these very slow Chromebooks that are being used. And then next is to get it on Android as well. So when kids go home, if they don't have a device, but you have like, you know, your parent or caregiver's phone, you can at least get on there, which we've heard from teachers once we put the from parents once we got the iOS version out on, oh, this is great. Like they can also, you know, get work done on their parents' cell phones, which is very cool. And then teachers platform is available on any device. And so along with accessibility, one thing that we wanted to make sure was that Boddle was delivered equitably. And so Boddle is a free resource to schools and districts. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't put especially the learning features that I went through, like the text-to-speech, instructional videos, did not want to put that behind a paywall, because those are learning features that are very important for students. So those are also, you know, completely free as well. And we're super, super happy to continue to onboard thousands of teachers and parents around the country and be able to provide this free resource for them as well. Tyler, I'm gonna hand it back over to you and would love to answer any questions specifically on like the game mechanics used or other areas as well.
Yeah, that sounds great, Edna. Thank you so much. That was terrific. And I'm gonna go ahead, I'll remove the spotlight and we're gonna open it up to some Q&A. So if anyone in the audience here has a question or a comment, feel free to unmute and join in. But I'll be the first one to start. You know, my first question actually is around, you know, for folks who are looking to become edtech entrepreneurs, how did you go about, I mean, this is an evolved product, right? So how did you go about creating like the first version of this? And, you know, how do you create an MVP when you're doing gaming?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what is very, very important is getting your end user feedback. So I remember when we very first started, we only had like clickable prototype, and we got with teachers in the Kansas City community that we knew, and we said, hey, what would you think of this? And we talked to students as well, like, what would you think of you know, a game that looked like this? And then talk through the teacher portal features. What would you want to see, and what would you want to be able to track in terms of reports? And that helped us a lot as we began to develop. Complete transparency. So before Boddle, I worked at a different startup, still in educational gaming, but there was so much focus on development. And so we developed this amazing like open world game, but there was not that much end user feedback, and it was like a computer install, you know, and once it was ready, it was like, yes, we're going to go to schools and they're going to love this. But then you think about it, like they're using Chromebooks, they're not going to install it on computers. And so that was a huge, you know, eye opener on the importance of doing teacher interviews, student interviews if you can, and getting that feedback as you're starting to build your prototype into MVP.
I have a couple more questions, but I want to make sure that if anyone else wants to, they can feel free to jump in. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the idea of, it seems like a lot has changed in time about what people are willing to do on the user side of things. I think we're a lot less tolerant of having to do more work than just logging in through the one-click Google integration. But a question to like earlier when you started this is, when did you first realize like, all right, I'm gonna have to be the one to do this? Like, when did that light bulb come off? Like, when did that pain become too much? You're like, hey, no one else is doing this. We're gonna have to start this.
I think there was probably different instances. I think one is just really deep diving into the market and seeing what was out there. And then as we began to you look at like the holes or the gaps. You know, you look at AAA games and how engaging they are, and then you go to educational games and you can see like, of course, students would rather just play AAA games. But then you realize that there is such a big impact that can be made in the education space through gamification. I think there's one instance where my co-founder Clarence was in a classroom, and with the just MVP version, very, very early, the student was trying it out and they just like their eyes lit up. I think that was like a big moment for him, which definitely impacted me. Just hearing that story was like, wow, yes, we have to do this. And we're starting with math, but really trying to build a gamification marketplace to where students can take their Boddle characters and learn any subject through these mini games is what we're building, which we see a lack of that in the current market. So we're excited to kind of go head first into it.
Yeah. David, I know you asked a question in there, and still one I was thinking too. His question was, how are you monetizing the product? Because you mentioned you're giving it away free to districts. So
yeah,
how's that
that's
working?
a great question. Yeah. So how we're looking at it is similar to like a Kahoot, or I'd say how Prodigy actually is probably the best example. So we monetize on the B2C side with in-game purchases that are not tied to learning features. So if they wanted, to enhance like their virtual environment or get extra in-game purchases. So monetizing like a gaming company, but still making sure to keep all the learning features free. The current stage that we're in now is really acquisition and retention. And so just getting as many users as possible, making sure that it's an awesome product, getting as much feedback and iterating it, and putting in new features as well.
Got it. So yeah, so the in-game purchases, just like Fortnite or whatever, it seems like gaming is going that direction in general. So the question that begs, I guess, for me to ask is so if you're a student, you're in Boddle, and let's say you buy like a cool skin or outfit, I don't know what you're selling on there exactly, but if they graduate or they leave schools, do they lose access to that account, or are they able to like carry that character with them or log in independently? What's that look like?
Yeah, so they can log in independently. So the way we built it is that the accounts is not tied to a teacher, but each account is tied to a student. So, and they can link their parent account as well. So even, this year, we're about to finish the school year, students are moving on to the next grade. Parents can tie in their account, tie themselves into their student's account. So then even with them leaving their teacher's class, they can still carry on their progress and continue the Boddle.
So like a homeschooling, like students could potentially sign up for Boddle as well. Okay.
Correct. Yes.
Got it. So Yulia has a question here. Yulia, feel free if you guys want to jump in and ask these yourselves, go right ahead. If you're in a spot where you can't, then I will answer. I'll read them out for you. But I'll give you the chance to unmute if you'd like. All right. No, I'll do it for you, Yulia. No worries. All right. So what grade are you targeting right now, Edna?
Yes. So we are kindergarten through 6th grade for right now. What we do see is some teachers that are in special education that use Boddle for their 7th and 8th grade students that really need to reinforcement in those earlier skills. But the content we have is kindergarten through 6th grade.
Gotcha. Question here from Peter. Is your passion primarily in education, or is it in game development?
That is an excellent question. I would say, so my co-founder, comes from the gaming background. My passion has always been in education. I think the more we build this and just diving deep into game mechanics and how they work and how it can really be used in a healthy way to motivate students, I would say it's in education and in game mechanics, maybe not game development, if that makes sense for me personally.
Yep. Gotcha. And by the way, shout out, we got Mr. Nick Jones in here, who's part of the EdHub Fellowship. Glad to see you in here. So Yulia was asking, again, follow-up question. Is your target only math, or is there other subjects for reading or example? And I know you mentioned that you're looking to branch out. So to tag on to that question, what does the roadmap look like for introducing other subjects?
Yeah. So what we're looking at now is partnering with content providers to load in other subjects into Boddle. So the roadmap is probably looking at early 2022 to start doing that, because right now the focus is on acquisition and retention. And then looking at reading and phonics first for sure, because that's what we've had a lot of demand for, and then opening it up to other subjects as well.
Got it. So another question here, David asks, he said everything is about progressive metrics these days. What's the impact on end of year scores? His comment was, it sounds like there's an opportunity for you to shine there. I don't know exactly what he means by progressive metrics, but I'm also not in that community directly. So if you do, that's great.
And maybe I might be defining this wrong, but David, are you talking about sort of like that continuous assessment when you talk of progressive metrics? Because if you are, then that is, like, we've seen that to be such a great tool to use with continuous assessments, so that throughout the school year, you're understanding where students are exactly, and not just waiting for testing season to come to then assess where their level is at.
Let me jump in here if I may. Two items. One, after the classrooms are using your product, are they finding that the end of year outcomes are greatly improved? And then you address the other piece of it, which I was trying to be open about to give you sort of free rein of not having to wait until the end of the year, but actually being able to see all the way through and to be able to target. So, yeah.
Yes, thanks so much, David. Absolutely. So one thing is, of course, teachers are not only using Boddle, and we are a supplemental tool. So we're currently, there's an organization called Lean Lab Education in Kansas City. So we're partnering with them for a research study with 2 Kansas City schools who've been using it. And then we can kind of see what are the student outcomes at the end of the year tied to the use of Boddle. I think right now we collect a lot, like we do a lot of teacher interviews and surveys to find out what the effect has been. And what we hear most is like, oh, they love it. They're so much more confident in doing math now. My less motivated students in math are so excited for math class. So even those things we know are impactful, because now we see, okay, their students are more motivated to do math, which then gets them practicing more. One after school program that we did have a chance to, that was only using math for Boddle, so they didn't have anything else for math except Boddle, was able to show students like improving over time, because on the back end you can see where the learning gaps are, and then once they master those skills, it shows that. It's a small set of students. There was like 12 students in that after school program, but it was great to see that where they were only using Boddle.
So I want to follow up on the note about getting into the schools. So that seems like that's potentially a tricky way to navigate, navigating the school system. It's not like you're working with B2B. It's a very different animal in general. Can you share a little bit of what that process is like, and, working with schools and how to build trust there?
Yes. So let me say the one biggest mistake that I made in March of 2020, when schools were, shutting down, going remote. Here I was, I'm like, I have a list of principals. I was like, team, we're going to call these principals. Worst idea. Principals are dealing with 1,000 different things. They don't want to hear about, Boddle Learning. Like, they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with trying to find funding and get students like meals when they're not in school. And so that was mistake number one. So working with schools is very hard. But what we've seen is teachers, so what we do is a bottoms up approach. Who are going to be using it? Teachers are going to be using it in the classroom. So once we were like, okay, stop trying to go top down and just go bottoms up, we were able to get thousands of teachers on board. This is exactly what they're looking for, especially with remote learning and trying to get their students engaged. And then the teachers became the evangelists who were then telling their math instruction coaches and their tech coaches, principals, hey, we're using this tool and we really like it. And then all of a sudden they're sharing it with all their other teachers. So that has been our means of really getting into schools and partnering with schools as well.
Yeah, so a little bit of a flywheel kind of approach. Makes a lot of sense. So another question from the chat here. So how do you evaluate your games in terms of efficiency? Do you have any consulting about what ways are better for teaching particular topics?
How do I evaluate games in terms of efficiency? I would say, well, one, there's some metrics that you can look at in terms of game sessions, right? Game session length, like how long are students spending on this game? And then during that time, how much learning content are they going through? Like what we were able to see is like students were going through, I don't want to say the incorrect number, but it is essentially in line with what they would take for a standardized test in an hour. Clarence knows that exact number of questions per hour. But that helps, you know, because we heard from, you know, other teachers on, oh, there's a, you know, we were using this other tool, but it was just too much gaming and they're just running around in their virtual world and they weren't really getting the work done. So that's how we kind of keep on looking at that. And even as we add more, because we are planning on adding more game features to keep it more engaging for students, thinking through, if we do that, we want to add game locks that teachers can say, okay, we're going to lock out these games for this time period and give teachers that control on their side. So that's how we look at efficiency. And then do you have consulting about ways that are better for teaching particular topics? So for me, what we've seen, and it's not for particular topics, but we see a lot of games where, for example, I'm going to teach fractions. So here's a pizza slice cutting game. Those types of games, what we have seen is kids are able to just sniff out the education piece and they're like, oh, this is boring, I don't want to play this, versus going like games first approach and then embedding the learning content into it. We did a lot of looking at both of those ways of teaching through games, and we found that embedding learning content to games to be the better way.
That I just want to comment. I think that's like really brilliant because I feel like I know I have kids and we've looked at different learning gaming, you know, learning opportunities that were more fun, and it always seems like the reason why they're not fun is because it's like we want to force this learning experience on them. Like we want them to come out with this, and then they're like, and then let's like lay a game on top of it, where it's like no kids like are interested in games in that sense. And so like the fact that you're doing it that way, I think it seems like that'd be intuitive because like by now everybody on this chat is grown up with gaming at some point, you know? So, but for whatever reason, it doesn't seem like the market has done that. And it's always like, you know, curriculum first, gaming second, and it obviously causes issues. So I'm excited that there's actually somebody out there doing this because my wife and I are talking about like, you know, is this ever going to happen? Anyway, I was excited about your approach there. Anyway, so another question here was, this is from Peter. He was asking what challenges you anticipate when you branch out into other subjects beyond math. And then also, will this require significantly different gaming mechanics?
So I don't think it will require significantly different game mechanics, but certain things like, for example, when we think of reading and phonics, which is why we want to make sure we carefully do this and carefully implement this in the right way, is we would want features like text, not text to speech, but voice to text, right? So reading and phonics, you want to be able to have the students like read out whatever the sentence is and for it to capture it. We've been working with Amazon and they do have new tools that they just brought out like late last year for this, but trying to figure out, is this really the right tools for us to use with Boddle? So just making sure that we're using the right learning features as we implement more subjects. And then the second thing too is that making sure we are becoming more diverse in the types of questions, the question types that we ask, depending on the subjects as well.
All right. So when you start to develop the game, how do you decide what kind of games how do you decide what kind of a game will address the skills? That was a question from Yulia. Hopefully I'm reading that correctly there. Yulia, what did you mean by that? So the type of skills you want the students to learn?
Yeah, so basically what I want to know is, so there is all kind of technique how the people explain children what to do and how the children understand the concept. I'm just wondering, when you start to develop the game, how do you decide, I will do that with the pizza cutting or with the, I don't know, ice cream paddle or something like that? You know, there are several techniques which address the same skill. And for some children is a little bit different than for another. That my second question was about that. Do you have, how you decide at first place what kind of game you will pursue? And if the kids playing this game and still didn't get the skill, do you have some remedy? Do you have some different technique or different watch? I don't know. So that's my question.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So the way that we approach it is actually, instead of teaching, fractions through a pizza cutting game, we follow, Common Core, TEKS, and we're aligning it to all different state standards. So we're coming through just a hyper casual game first approach. So for example, one of the games we have on there is we have like a cooking game in there. And in order for them to be able to progress in that game, we'll have math content embedded at the top of that. And it would be a math fractions game, which is aligned to their specific standard. And then along with that, we include instructional videos that help them understand how to answer that type of math fraction skill. And then if they don't get the question right, still we have rationales that will pop up explaining like how to understand that specific type of question. So why that helps is because of that, right? When students are they will still have to do their standardized testing. And if we went with the pizza cutting, like this is how to understand fractions, then they'll only understand it that way, which isn't beneficial, right? We want them we're really just coming from how do we engage them and then give them the standards aligned math content overlaid on top of the gameplay. And the way we decide what type of gameplay to add is really through a lot of student interviews, which when we ask teachers like, hey, let us know what your students think, I mean, they come back with all types of ideas. That's the one thing we're not lacking in is student ideas. Most of the time we have to be like, I don't know if we can put a rocket on that thing.
Thank you.
So thanks, Yulia. Next question here is, until now, having an adult read to a child has been the single largest indicator for the child's success. Care to comment on whether you are disrupting that? And I can't speak to whether I don't know if that's true or not, but I definitely know that is a huge impact for sure. So yeah, any comments on that?
I would not say we are disrupting that at all. Really what we're coming in is as a supplement. So let's say once we are able to add reading and phonics into it, it would be more of just, like a supplemental tool to help students as they're learning to identify where the gaps are in their reading and phonics, and then help them to master those skills through engagement. Even with math right now, we know that teachers and parents play such a big role, and that's why along with the gaming, we put a big emphasis on the features available on the teacher and parent portals to allow them to see the student progress, identify the learning gaps, and help them facilitate learning as well. So for sure, yeah, we are not replacing that in any way, I would say.
Yeah. Got it. You had another question in the chat. I didn't know if the last response
I
answered
asked,
there.
yeah, sure.
Okay, as I thought. I want to make sure.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Well, we're at 5:40, so we have about a few more minutes. Wanted to see if there's any other additional comments or questions from the community. And if not, that's quite all right. So there's two things actually I wanted to put in the chat here and also present to the group. So first off, actually, before I do that, Holston says, great concept. How do parents quantify the success of their students? So let's answer that before I go on.
Oh, yes. So parents do play a really big part. So what we are able to help parents see on their side is similar to all the features that are available to teachers as well. One, to quick diagnostic, continuous diagnostic of where their child is at. And then we put some parents like to be very engaged and hands-on and like, I want to give my child an assignment and help them to work on specific skills. And other parents are like, I just want to give them some healthy screen time. Like they're playing Fortnite, they're playing Minecraft. Like I want them to play something fun that I know is also going to be good for them. So in those two ways, that's where we've seen the parent success. Some parents are like, I just like this because it's hands off. I don't have to do much and it's adapting automatically for my child. But then giving them the ability to create the assignments so that they can have more control of their students' learning process as well.
Got it. Nick also says, great information. Wish I could have joined from the start. So Nick, we will have this is recorded, so we will post it on Venture Cafe's website and YouTube next week. Keith says, great session, very informative. Best wishes to your efforts, Edna.
Thank you.
So also before we wrap up, Edna, if you don't mind, please, we'd love to have put your website link in the chat. That way people can go check it out and learn a little bit more. And also while you're doing that, I wanted to ask, and I'll put that in the chat as well, what's something that the Venture Cafe community can do to help you as the founder getting started and growing?
Absolutely. Awesome question. I think just to help spread awareness of Boddle with the community to teachers and to parents as well, especially as summer is coming up. So a big thing, in summer learning loss is like the term you hear so much. It's like kids learn all of this during the school year, and then the summer they lose so much of what they learn, and then they start the next year behind. So we want to make sure that students are having a really fun way to stay engaged throughout the summer with math, and then be more prepared for the next school year. So yeah, we just love for you to share Boddle with the community.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I have two grandsons, and I would like them to test your program. I just go to the website, and that's where we can communicate, get to this game.
Yes. Yeah. If you go to the website, you can just sign up there. We also have an app on the iOS App Store. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you can download the app there and then easily create their accounts and get them started.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So yeah, we might have time for one more question. So while somebody's working up the courage to ask it, I did put it in the chat too. If there's one takeaway, I'd love to hear what it was from those who are in attendance. You can throw it in the chat, or you can send it to me direct. We always love to share what people learn from it. And any other final questions for Edna?
Edna, I actually have a question for you. My name is Nick. I'm the guy that Tyler was referring to earlier. So a little bit off topic, but it made me think about it when you dropped your website in the chat. Do you think with you being able to deliver your product to different users and stakeholders and things like that, choosing a .com versus .org domain, do you think that kind of sets you up for I guess a certain stigma associated with your brand?
That is a really good question. I think because we're not nonprofit, I think .org a lot of the times you think not, at least I do, I think nonprofit, but we're not a nonprofit, we're a for-profit. So .com kind of made sense for us at least.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know. I was actually wondering the same thing, because it does seem like just dealing with education. But it seems like obviously that hasn't been. I wonder if that's something that I've overthought as well before. I'm like, oh yeah, should that be .com? Should be .co, .org, and I wonder in the end if that had, maybe that's such a doesn't really affect the positioning of your brand enough. Maybe people are like, hey, I wonder if this is some greedy for profit, but maybe in the end they're like, hey, the product's good. Who cares if it's .com or .org, I guess, is maybe where it falls in the end. But it's definitely something I know entrepreneurs tend to think about, is like, what should be that TLD at the end?
Right.
So I thought that was a great question, actually.
I think what helps too is sort of like, who do you align yourself with and who are your strategic partners? So in the very beginning, of course, it was like, who's Boddle Learning? But then we got into the AT&T Aspire Accelerator, and that gave us like national exposure and the backing of like a very credible partner. And so that, now we're part of the Google for Startups as well. And so the partnerships that we align with, being a part of Lean Lab Education's research study, has helped to, people to be like, okay, Boddle is credible. So for us, that's been more of what's helped us versus like the domain.com versus .org.
Got it. So we'll do one last question and then we'll wrap up here. This is from Holston. He was asking if you'll get into any of the micro learning. He gave the example of Quantify.com, which does stuff for adult and corporate learning. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for us, at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to stay in that K-12 space. That's where we're most knowledgeable and that's where our strengths are in. So yeah, staying in K-12. Got
it. Makes sense. Well, Edna, thank you so much. This has been really informative. I've really enjoyed it. And so thanks again for your time. We wish you the best of luck. Folks, if the URL's in the chat if you wanted to go check it out. And again, I would say thanks to everybody else for joining us today. This is the EdHub series on education, innovation, and equity. And we do this every the fifth or the fourth Thursday, but we moved it this month. But we'll be back again on May 27th at 5 p.m. So thanks again. We'll see you around. And Edna, take care. And everybody else, have a good rest of your night as well.